clinical text often describe the intervertebral discs as cartilaginous or collagenous discs. And you can see why that would be. The pubic symphysis, too, where the two hip bones come together anteriorly, that is a cartilaginous joint characterized by a little disc of fibrocartilage. What are we looking at here? What type of cartilage is this?
Hyaline.
He said, intimating that you may need to identify something like this on the test. So make sure you can tell me what we're looking at here.
The hyaline cartilage.
Is this fibrocartilage, elastic cartilage, or hyaline cartilage?
Hyaline cartilage.
Hyaline, yeah. This is hyaline cartilage. We don't see many fibers here. The white things here are called what? Lacuna. And so what is all this purple? I guess that's purple. What's the term we use to describe all the purple? Matrix. I heard somebody say matrix. I just thought I did. That's good enough. So this is all matrix. We don't see little fibers. This would be the glassy hyaline cartilage. Oftentimes those lacuna are arranged in vertical rows, especially in long bones at the epiphyseal region. So be able to just be able to identify the major components there.
Is there a difference between 2, 4, 5?
This 2, 4, and 5. I think you're the first person that's ever asked that. So let's see. This would be the one would be the perichondrium. My guess is that what this was doing was simply pointing out the relative developmental stages of the chondrocytes. Remember, in those lacuna, there would be chondrocytes, and they have various developmental stages. It looks to me like that's what they're pointing out, but I wouldn't know precisely. It looks like, well, you can see the extracellular matrix. That's what this stands for. I'm good for that one. But, we've talked about bone, so we've talked about the relative functions of bone. I don't think we need to say much more about that. In mammals, the bone forms the endoskeleton. It protects the central nervous system. We'll talk more about that. It's an important hematopoietic tissue. You know what hematopoiesis is. You know a little bit about the importance of bone, certain regions of bone for formation of red and white blood cells. We indicated that we're going to find out later that the body may draw upon the calcium salts that are stored in bone to maintain the precise proportion or precise concentration of calcium in the blood. So that can lead to conditions such as osteoporosis, osteopenia, potentially could be a problem, especially for the aging. The composition, once again, usually almost entirely calcium salts, such as calcium phosphate, hydroxyapatite. We've talked about the organization of compact bone and medullary bone, cancellous bone, spongy bone. You know what trabeculae are. You know what osteons, eversion systems are. If you don't, let me know, raise your hand. And we talked about a lot of these terms, such as remodeling. You know what deposition is. You know what resorption is. And by the way, even now, remember I wrote this on the board before, it's not reabsorption. There is no ab in there. It's resorption. I just thought these were very beautiful. Isn't this ironic? It's holding up a bone. I'm sure there's something very profound in that. While I'm thinking about the although, I will reflect upon that. This is just to remind you of the organization, the compact bone on the perimeter. We talked about periosteum, endosteum, periosteum. This is the region of the bone that's primarily innervated with the nerve endings. The eversion systems, the eversion canals, medulla. You can also see the trabeculae that make up the cancellous bone, the endosteum along here. So again, Remember we talked about nutrient arteries, we talked about epiphyseal and metaphyseal arteries, highly vascularized tissue. Yeah.
Is trabecular bone lining the inside of the medullary canal?
Yeah, there's a transitional region in that, as you move toward the interior of the medulla, there's no bone at all, or no trabecula at all. But yeah, as you move toward the perimeter, toward the endosteum, that bone is described as trabecular cancellous. And it's only usually a relatively thin layer in adult long bones. Same thing there. What are we looking at here? And why don't I include the slide here? What type of tissue is this? Connective tissue. So, yeah, these red blood cells, these 8-micron red blood cells are part of they're the cellular components of the, as the British would say, the bloody matrix. And this is just a little table summarizing some of the things we talked about. You can look through this and see if it comports with the terminology that we've been using. Here's a little slide talking about some of the membranes that have been brought up or been mentioned. For example, we know what the periosteum is. We've talked about the importance of periosteum for blood supply and neural innervation to bone. Perichondrium, remember that's the outer layer of the cartilage. Highly variable to the extent that the cartilage has a blood supply. It's going to be in the perichondrium, but that's very sparse, and in some types of cartilage it won't be present at all. We talked about the synovial membranes that secrete the synovial lubricating fluid in the articulatory joints. The deep fascia here, we're going to have other names for that later, but we're going to find, for example, that muscle is surrounded by a specialized type of deep fascia called epimysium, and that epimysium changes its organization as we move into deeper layers of the muscle. But in this course, we'll have yet another name for it. It's called, in most cases, that epimysium and related tissues are called scarpa fascia. So we'll talk about that later. One of the objectives that you should have for yourself by the time you finish this course, your preceptors, your mentors have mentioned this in many cases, that they're disappointed when you can't do this. For any region of the body, you should be able to name all the tissue layers involved in a puncture wound. So you want to make sure you know what fascial membranes are involved in a puncture wound of the arm or the abdomen or the thorax. And so hopefully one of the things we'll do as we proceed, we'll cover that. You know, the meninges then are those specialized protective layers that protect the central nervous system, both in the brain and the spinal cord. And then when we talk about the thorax, we'll talk about the fibrous and serous pericardium. All of these are connective tissue membranes. All right, we've got a couple minutes. Let's take a quick quiz. What type of tissue is this? Okay, good. Areolar, excellent. Areolar tissue. And how do you know that? The fibers are all over the place. You have cells. You don't have a lot of matrix here. Yeah, this would be loose, irregular, or areolar tissue. What is this?
Cartilage.
Is it dense or loose? Dense. Regular or irregular? There you go. Dense, regular connective tissue. Tendon or ligament. Although, never mind. What are we looking at here?
Adipose tissue.
Yeah, this is white fat, or unilocular fat. These would be the adipocytes in that tissue here. This is in the liver, and what we're looking at, these are the dark reticular fibers. And those reticular fibers, again, are analogous to the rebar in the concrete. They just confer strength to the parenchyma of the liver. The parenchyma is when we talk about parenchyma, that's the loose tissue that makes up an organ or system. What's this? Simple columnar. This is an intestinal villus, so that would be a simple columnar with the brush border. Apparently the person didn't have their sausage this morning. And then here we're looking at two epithelial cells. And this is actually intestinal because I can see the villi up here. Remember, this is the zonula occludens. The zonula occludens is made up of, that's correct, tight junctions. Tight junctions, remember the tight junctions. And then the zonula adherens, if you had to guess, is made up of adherens junctions. And then down here are the plaques that would be made up of the desmosomes. What's this? So here's our epithelium down here. The skin, so what was skin? What's all that stuff up there? Yeah, that's keratinized, stratified squamous. Keratinized, stratified squamous. Here's the tricky one, what's that? Yeah, that's transitional. This would be the epithelium of the bladder. What are we looking at here? Well, it says stratified stratified cuboid. Yeah.
On a couple slides before, after the keratinized stratified, the one after.
This one? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It said-
Oh, it does say, I'm sorry, see, I made the bad mistake, I'm sorry. This is non-keratinized stratified squamous, but compare that to this. And in some cases, you can see, remember, what I should have been looking at, and I was instructing you to do so, you want to pay attention to this outer cellular layer here, and if we go back to that, if I had done that, well, even there, you can see down here the cells are more, I don't know, cuboidal, sometimes they'll be columnar. But as they move toward the exterior, they flap, they become squamous. And so that's where we get the terminology. My apologies, I'm getting there.
Would you find this in like inside the mouth?
Yes, exactly right. This would be typical of the oral mucosa. Exactly right. And I think that's it. What is the last one? What is the schedule? But notice in the simulated pseudostratified, the nuclei are at multiple levels, and you have the long cilia up here, so you should be able to differentiate that from the simple columnar. Sure. Enough. That's enough for today. We'll see you next week.